Ireland against England. Yes, this is always the game that attracts the most headlines and the most attention from an Irish point of view in a Six Nations. It's just the way it goes.
It is.
England is the big one,
especially when it's Paddy's Day midweek and it's Paddy's weekend now. Sure, there's all kinds of reasons for wanting this to be the massive game that it absolutely is.
I mean, it's a huge game. Obviously, both sides have missed out on their chance to win the competition.
That's true.
But nevertheless, I think there's a lot at stake going forward.
Both of them vying for that winning record today. The 3-2 versus the 2-3. 2-3 feels a lot worse than 3-2. To go into a new season with.
Indeed, yeah. The game takes place obviously Saturday, middle of the Super Saturday lineup. Indeed. Pretty much bang on, because obviously there's Super Rugby later on and Rugby Europe earlier. It's pretty much the middle game of the day, no matter how you look at it.
Indeed.
It's going to be 4:45 GMT. That's at the Aviva, Lansdowne Road in Dublin. Refereed by Mathieu Reynal.
See another French man with the whistle.
Always the way. Always the way.
Unless France are playing.
Yeah, indeed. Unless France are playing, it's a French ref. That's the way it goes. The weather's to be grand. Small chance of rain, but hopefully not, and pretty much great conditions right across Europe this weekend. So
same for all of them. Yeah,
chance for some running rugby.
This is true. Yes, whether we'll see that running rugby is a different story, perhaps. But they're definitely, the conditions won't be the part of it. Partly cloudy, 9 to 11 degrees, 20% chance of rain, 79% humidity. Standard Irish fare, so it is. Just in terms of match colour, it's always a feisty game. There's no two ways about it. Both of these sides should want to get after each other. They often do. It's the consequence of being neighbours with the storied history that we do have. So there's no shortage of motivation for both sides. But there are different kind of factors in it. As I was saying, both of them are sitting 2-2 for their tournament so far. A chance to salvage a winning record after disappointing starts to both of their campaigns. To be honest, day one didn't go the way both of these teams planned, or either of these teams planned, but now they've managed to salvage something, and both of them will be desperate to kind of keep that momentum up and go into the summer with a bit more of a positive feeling about their game. It's interesting, like from an Ireland point of view, just given the nature of their 2 wins against Scotland and Italy and their 2 defeats against France and Wales, where really in every game except for the Italy game they've been outdone from a offensive point of view, from a clinicality point of view, from a speed point of view, and yet have counterpunched with a really big pack. There's an element of sameness and staleness that will be emphasised if they lose this game. Yes. So
from that point of view, it is a very big game for Ireland, because if they go out there and, as has been the case the last 4 times they've played England, get outplayed physically and have nothing to offer,
blown away in the first quarter or first half, which has been the very disappointing thing. As much as there's usually that bite I was alluding to, that passion, that hatred for your opponent, nearly, they haven't really seen that from Ireland in this exact matchup over that. It couples, like, it's a horses for courses kind of thing. You're making the argument, like, are Ireland really that good, or did they just beat Scotland with that game plan, with the latchers, with the ball carriers? Did they just bully them every time? The answer is seemingly yes, but you bring that exact same game plan against a mean English pack, and you just run into a white wall the whole time, and you can't get through
and have nothing to offer. Then, like, the kicking game can be diffused by your Johnny Mays, and then all of a sudden you're in a bind if you're Ireland, and you've been stale. So from that point of view, it is. It'll
first priority is just perform. Just perform. Like, as much as a win is pretty important, and to be honest, you'd think that they really do need to get a win over England or a top side to really get any confidence that what they're doing is anything other than mediocre. Like, they really need to think that if we're on the level of where we want to be, which is hunting a World Cup semi-final in 2 years' time, you need to be getting some big wins against these opposition. But to be honest, against England, the first priority isn't the win, it's the performance. It's turning up from the opening whistle and being in the fight and putting in big hits and being just
but that involves a change up as well. Like, I'm kind of a different mindset, like, where it's not like, the result is obviously important for all the reasons that we mentioned, but actually the manner of the performance takes on a more important meaning. Like, if you ask any of the Ireland players or coaches, that 18-7 defeat in Twickenham, where they were 18-0 down before they scored, was like them being in the fight, and they were in the physical fight. They were kind of creating some things and not taking them, and England then did counterpunch well, but they had most of the ball and they were physical, and they weren't blown away in the physical matchup. They were just sort of blunt versus not blunt, and that was the story of that game. So I think they can show up and perform well by their own standards and be in a great pack battle, and then lose out badly by not being clinical enough. And I think that's the ugly picture that you could see. So I think the main point of emphasis, as I said in the build up to last week's game, was not really like how many tries they score or do they win the game. It's really how they try and go about creating things offensively.
Yes. And are they going to identify and then attack space?
Yes. And are they going to try and play smart and manipulate a defence and move the ball well?
Yeah.
And I think I would even ask you the question. I don't think it's as big a deal as the result as is whether or not Ireland do expand their playbook a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm
desperate to see that. Desperate, don't you know? I'm only desperate to see that a more expanded, more rounded, more courageous Irish team with ball in hand. That's really what I want to see. I think it's a long time ago that we had the Brian O'Driscolls in the centre, but even Eddie O'Sullivan, who became a bit of a pariah after his World Cup performance, but the man knew how to craft a lovely set piece move off a midfield scrum. You gotta give him that, and we just haven't done that at all. Like even under Joe Schmidt as well, as blunt as they were at times, even in that system, and they were kind of very narrow, they were still, there was more variety, there was more purpose to it, and there was, crucially, strike moves off set piece. There was crucial ones. Even though the multi-phase was a bit blunt, they still grab a Stockdale try on a reverse ball against the All Blacks because they have a nice planned move, It would be nice to see a bit more of that. Maybe the Henshaw dummy line as opposed to the Henshaw hit up off. Something more from Ireland from is definitely what we want to see from ball in hand. And then from England's point of view then in this contest, it's similar but a different kind of mindset going in. They'll be confident that they have this team's number, just based on the inverse of what we were saying from Ireland's point of view, the last 4 showings, and then 4 showings plus if you throw in the Sarries games against Leinster as well. There's been a lot of recent memories of these English players just having their
matched up
really well and diffused, and then bullied this Irish team and this Irish pack even that have much lauded. There are a few changes in terms of Ireland's line-out acumen is a bit better this tournament, so there will be things there to be concerned. Their turnover generating has been good, so I'm sure England will be focused on their ruck ball. But they would go a long way towards restoring some of their faith in their progress and in their coach and in their whole direction if they can see out this game, win it, after that great game that they were involved in, that they're under no illusions. It was a bloody great game last week against France, and they came out the right side of it. If they can keep that momentum going with a win here in Dublin, they're in a great place, despite losing the opening game at home against Scotland.
They've expanded their game. They went into the tournament playing quite stale rugby. They have improved in the last number of weeks. It's turned into a good result. They will feel like they're building nicely with a win here. But on the inverse side of it, a loss here gives them...
it's a head-scratching one. One step forward, 2 steps back feeling.
It would give them, in a Lions year, a reverse Triple Crown, a Triple Crown of L's.
Yeah, that's
which
no good.
Would be, it would make it very difficult for a lot of those guys to make their own case from a Lions tour point of view.
It's true.
Despite sort of the electrifying performances we know the likes of Itoje and Curry and co can bring, they would have a tough case to make for themselves if they went 0-3 against the rival sides from a British Lions point of view. So I think that's going to be a point of emphasis for them, no question about it.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I had a thought going into last week, and I often have it, like when something consistently happens, there's always the fear that the side with the edge can be complacent and be caught, and
that's
that the
true.
Side without the edge can sort of be buoyed and determined to right the wrongs of the past. And it's something that was factoring into my thinking ahead of Ireland-Scotland last weekend that didn't play out at all.
Yes.
So
Scotland will want to avenge all these recent heartbreaks against Ireland, and I'm sure they do. But
they didn't play a good game at all. No. Scotland, they played an awful game, and so that's the fear from an Ireland point of view, is that might go wrong. But that's sort of the overarching view from both sides. As far as the squads are concerned, we're actually in the blessed position of being able to actually have the squads for one of these, given our lateness, which I think you can forgive, given Paddy's Day and everything else. I'm going to start with the Irish team, which was named obviously today.
Yeah.
A couple of changes. Dave Kilcoyne comes in for Cian Healy at
Makes
loosehead.
all the sense in the world. Cian Healy started 3 games, I think, so far. So, he has more minutes than Kilcoyne, despite being the older man. Just makes good sense.
Herring and Furlong hold on to their jerseys in the front row. Tadhg Byrne replaces the injured James Ryan, coming in at second row, moving from the back row. CJ Stander, who obviously he's announced his retirement, and we will touch on that in greater detail later in the show. Obviously, massive congratulations to him on a great career, and thankful for him for all he's brought to Ireland. But his last game in the jersey will be a blindside flanker, which is his position.
Yes, his actual position. Yay! I've been begging for it all tournament long. It's a shame that it took James Ryan getting injured to facilitate it, but he should have been at 6 the whole time. He's great, but he has been very much an enforcer for this Irish team for the last few years, Aldrin Smith. So yeah, great servant.
Indeed. And we've got Josh van der Fleer coming in for the injured Will Connors at 7.
Yeah.
Jack Conan coming in at number 8. Obviously,
big day for him.
Player. Big day for him is right. Yeah. Murray replaces Gibson Park at 9. Sexton at 10. Aki and Henshaw now in the centre with Ringrose out injured. And Stockdale comes in for the not injured but dropped James Lowe. Keith Earls on the other wing, and Hugo Keenan at fullback.
Yes.
That's the Ireland team. I suppose I'll just rattle on the England team. Makov and Apola stays in. Cowan Dickey, obviously. Sinclair make up that front row. Charlie Ewells comes in at lock, which is a big man.
Another big man for a big man.
Yeah, Johnny Hill out on the bench as well, so there's definitely no lack of physicality in the pack. Wilson holds on to his jersey, which is a curiosity with all the options they have in the back row, but Curry and Billy V, no question about their class.
No.
Ben Youngs and Ford, halfbacks, makes all the sense in the world. Farrell's still in there. Back 3 the same, but Elliot Daly comes in for Henry Slade at 13.
Which is a curiosity. I really don't know what Lawrence did to annoy Eddie Jones early in the tournament, but it's something. Does
that have a balance to it? Elliot Daly instead of Slade, especially up against like Henshaw and Aki in the centre.
It's more of a like for like in terms of Slade. Like he's a left footer, same as Slade. He's a bit more of a deep passer. He's
not a like for like as far as Tuilagi.
No, it is not. There is still a big Tuilagi shaped hole in that England team, and Tuilagi I believe is 6 from 6 against Ireland. It might be more, but I'm pretty sure it's 6 from 6 in games that he's played against Ireland. He has never lost, but England have lost when he's not been there on occasion. So there's potential for that to become a little bit disjointed in the midfield and perhaps a little lateral. Certainly opposite Aki Henshaw, it makes Ireland the more physical centre partnership, for better or worse. That will be true in terms of just heft alone. But they're two interesting teams. There were different options available for both. There were some hands were forced. There was a question as whether George would come back in, but I think Cowan Dickey is right to be retaining his jersey. Johnny Hill, as impact off the bench, is huge. And then conversely for Ireland, Tadhg Byrne, who has been brilliant in the back row where he belongs. I would like to see him at number 8 for Ireland, to be honest, but because he can pass. Number 8s need to be able to pass. And that's my thing. Number 8s need to pass the ball, and Tadhg can do that. But at lock, and you've cited it before, there are concerns about him at lock. He's a little bit slight as a test level lock, and when you're looking at Ewells Itoje with Johnny Hill to come off the bench, that's a lot of heft. A lot of heft.
You look at like Cameron Wokey, who's a very similar player in my mind, coming on for France and getting so shocked by the physicality of it. I know he was a blindside flank, but Tadhg Byrne, obviously he's been one of the players of the tournament. He's going to be in there, but I definitely prefer him in the back row out of that sort of physical battle where you can be shown up for a lack of out and out heft. But that said, it's a needs must selection. I don't think Ryan Baird straight in there would have been the right balance either.
And Ryan Baird off the bench has provided good impact thus far. He provided a game winning play last week, and I'm sure he'll be making his appearance, because one thing that Ireland do is use their pack ferociously for the whole time, so they will rotate all of them in. So Baird will get another cap and a go at it.
No question. I think we'll move on and just look at the game from the point of view of both teams, starting with the hosts and our when you say our vested interest, that's the way you put it.
Yes, it is that.
Ireland, obviously, going into this game in need of a win. It's been par for the course against England so far for this Ireland team. The matchups have been brutal for them against England. The points of optimism looking ahead to this game, the things that they have going into this that they didn't have
the last few times
is first and foremost obviously a really competent line out, and just generally a turnover game on defence that is generating all kinds of turnovers. So a functional set piece with a quality turnover game is not something they've brought to every England game. In the last.
No, they haven't brought any of it. Their line-out was absolutely made a show of by England the last every time they've met. And to be fair, it wasn't just England doing that. Their line-out was a bit of a disjointed mess for the last 2 years. It's been night and day all tournament. It's been one of the big positives for Ireland coming out of a middling Six Nations. It's when you open 0-2 after the first 2 weeks, it's always going to be a disappointing one. But the Pack have been mighty, and this is a huge test for them just because of the nature of how England have beaten them in recent times. The question will be about the plan, because as it was, like the last time we saw them play England, it was felt very painful to watch. We did that little breakdown of what the attack was actually trying to accomplish. We were kind of bamboozled looking at it, where they do their Henshaw hit up, which I'm sure will be part of the plan. It might be Aki in that channel this time, but it'll be a hit up of first phase because that's the way it is. But like, as rudimentary as that is and as telegraphed as it is, it has actually created space. It did so in that England game in the Autumn Nations Cup last year. Like, we identified it in the early going. It was Henshaw hit up and then round the corner, and then there were 3 tries available to be scored. There was space on the left of the ruck, there was space on the right of the ruck, and there was space in behind the ruck. None of which was identified by Ireland, who it was Rossburn at 10 in that instance, sat deep, kicked it away, chaos ball, dead. That was it. It would be nice to see a little bit more of a plan in terms of how to attack them on set piece. Sure, France just illustrated how, like, I'm not expecting them to launch anything of the caliber of the Pinot try in terms of set piece, but they did demonstrate how a little bit of innovation and a little bit of deception can unpick this very intimidating English defence. But like, as intimidating as they are and as effective as they aren't as good as Ireland have made them look by simply running into them unrelentingly.
No, I mean, you look back to the last time Ireland beat England, which I think is as good a blueprint as any when you haven't won in so long.
Yes,
is kind of remembering how you did it when you could do it. Mm-hmm. There were 3 tries scored in that game. It was a Grand Slam decider on Paddy's Day back in 2018, so 3 years ago. One of which was, your chaos classic kick, bog standard Irish chaos kick that bounces for you in the end zone. Heaps pressure on the offense. Doesn't always work. England have got great at shutting it down.
Yes, but it was Anthony Watson under that one, because he was at fullback, which is not his best position, and he won't be there this time. No,
but young man in Max Malins, it's certainly not something that I would see Ireland rule out of their game without having the foundation to expand and go beyond. But the other 2 tries were interesting. They were a set piece strike play where they actually varied the point of attack and actually had a nice sleight of hand from Furlong dummying a loop, who instead popped it to a support runner. It was deceptive.
It was Bundy Aki actually in that instance. And all 3 of those guys are going to be on the pitch. It was Tyke Furlong to Bundy Aki with a lovely inside pass to CJ, who dotted it down.
They created a nice bit of deception off set piece, cut a hole through the middle, disguised runner Aki, and then found a support line to finish the try.
Yeah.
And then the other score was exposing England's sort of lethargy in terms of defensive intensity, which can be caught on the short side from time to time, especially if you're generating some quick ball.
Yeah.
Murray caught them with their pants down on the short side, and then Stockdale had the lethal acumen as a winger to finish it from far out.
Yeah.
Like, all of those little nuggets in terms of Ireland getting back to where they were at 2018, I don't think they're going to turn into Japan overnight, as much as that can irritate us. I don't think the quality of the pass from the centres with Henshaw and Aki in there is going to be anything to write home about. Mm-hmm. But just mixing in some clever variation, which does involve some variation of set piece and working clever little areas where England were so vicious against France in terms of their defensive line speed. Mm-hmm. They forced France to kick away a lot of good ball, but they did get caught early in the game by the way France did it was by keeping it alive, keeping the offloads going, keeping the pace of the game up, and then unsettling them in that way. Ireland need to sort of win a couple of collisions and then work usually it's a short side angle, but just work an angle where England are not as defensively squared up. Like, I remember we were doing that bit of footage back in the Nations Cup for the England game, and on third phase after a set piece, they went right to where the English defence was strongest. It was just a short carry off a ruck right to where like the Itojis of the world were, when actually they were a bit narrow and were for the catching on the short side as well, where they both props matched up together. It's isolating little things like that and then putting the right runners into those spaces. The 2 Tigers are so important as distributors, believe it or not. They need to be in there making the key passes, because both of them can get an edge on in a carry and link up and throw footwork and passes in. And it's just those little things that can unpick an English defence.
Indeed, and just little soft offloads from everyone. I would love to see just a simple shift of focus that sees Ireland try to get the ball out of contact quicker. Just try and get it out of contact. It doesn't.
There was a bit of that last week.
There was a little bit, and it's encouraging, and they need to build on that, because it's like, as I was saying, in all the weeks, there is a little bit of a hangover from the way Joe Schmidt had them playing, and from the multi-phased bludgeoning offense. there are a few just terrible traits that seem to be kind of almost mantras for this team that are just dead wrong. One of which is that like we're wearing on an opposition by carrying into them unrelentingly, because as much as that occasionally is true and it bullied Scotland, like James Ryan is out with a HIA this week because he's carrying into contact everywhere. The game isn't about attacking jerseys, it's about attacking space. And the other one that I was going to say though, just before you come in, is the notion that it is risky to throw a pass but safe to take a tackle and go into a ruck. That's just wrong. Like it's not true in rugby. It's safe to get. It's better to get the ball away from the breakdown. Breakdown is all kinds of dangerous. Going through 10 or 12 or 20 rucks before you finally get a try is risking the ball every time you go to the floor. Yeah. And I wish Ireland would just play with a little bit more urgency to get that ball away from the tackle area and away from the contact zone. Even if that's just little half offloads or big placements down and quick service, just a little bit of a change of focus would yield a lot more
work
result.
The ball into some space. One of the things I do like is having Conan and Tadhg on. We have in both of those guys good runners, but now we have also Furlong as well has to come in. Tadhg and Furlong and Conan are distributing forwards. And I think Ireland need to work that in more, because first of all there's an element of deception with having a forward out there in the wide channels.
Who can then throw a pass.
Players are less likely to suspect the wide play, in spite of the fact that those guys are better at it than the guys in the centre. And then those are the most skilled players. Those are the guys we want on the ball in those channels to maybe make things happen. So I definitely think there's some scope.
We did see Byrne in the wide channels, albeit he was in the back row against Scotland, but we saw it in the first phase, him linking up out in the wide channels. More of that, more pods of forwards and backs out in the tram lines, executing passes like that. Because there needs to be a bit of deception. There needs to be a little bit of like just shifting the point of contact and being a nuisance to play against in terms of be a little less predictable, because when you're predictable and you're just bludgeoning, we don't match up well against England. England are a power-based team. If you're good, like we can bully Scotland that way, but you can't do it to England. You'll end up wearing on your guys.
I mean, it would be very impressive to see them do it. One of the areas that they were mighty efficient in was the quality of the latch in the red zone offense, and I just think
Exeter
style, but it was an area that Scotland were really giving out to the ref, like they were like
sealing.
You're sealing.
Are the latchers sealing? It's an interesting one because Leinster play with latchers a lot, and I've often thought in a multi-phase sequence at like 10 or 12 phases, there's often a latcher who just falls over that it's like you could be pinned.
They've cooled down on that. Like they started the post-COVID time really going hard on sealing in the rucks, but they've cooled down on it a little bit, the refs. But it's a curiosity. I think it needs.
They want attacking rugby. All they need to do is stop calling everything crossing, and then the attacking rugby could thrive. But instead, no, they're letting people away with sealing sometimes.
Well, that's the question. I think it needs. It's an open question in need of an answer, which is: does the latcher need to keep his feet after a contact? Is he killing the ball if he goes to deck with the ball carrier? And the answer could well be yes. He at very least should have to roll away. But it's not. It's like an unanswered question in terms of how they're ruling it. But there might be a day of reckoning coming from Ireland if they keep going to that.
And as much as we might feel persecuted if they were to start ruling that, it's like, oh, that's why us, that's just the way we play. Again, I go back to my rugby purist, and it conflicts with my Irish fan very often. There's a rugby purist on one shoulder and an Ireland rugby fan on the other, and it's just telling me, it's like, going through a million phases with latchers protecting the ball is not how you play rugby. You go through just enough phases to suck in the numbers such that you can then find the try. That's what it should be about. Like, and Ireland are missing that far too often. They miss the killer pass all the time. The opportune moment passes them by every time. Like there's a pass to be thrown, there's 7 points, it's not on the floor, it's just recycled again and now it's gone.
I hear you on that. Now we've spoken at length about that before, but from an offensive point of view, it is just about little moments, little variations, one or two instances where they can grab a key try. Where this game for me is going to be won or lost by Ireland is on the other side of the ball, when England have
defending England,
that
mighty offense that has got better and better all week, all tournament long.
That's huge. Like the matchup is so intriguing because Ireland have been giving up scores to teams that have got into their half and have managed to generate quick ball. Their wide defence has suffered to contain teams. They've isolated their wingers a bit, all while not really blitzing and soaking yardage
and missing some tackles.
missing some tackles.
They missed 24 against Scotland.
Well, on a basic level, when you're moving backwards, not forwards, when you're kind of moving in a drift and facing the touchline, contacts are way, way harder.
Yeah,
from just
they're
a physics
not happening
point of
on
view.
your terms.
Yeah,
you're retreating and this guy's coming forward, so the whole collision's going towards your try line.
Indeed, and no side cuts a harder short ball more often or more successfully than England, because it's such a key part of their screen variation is the guy who's picking that short line.
Yeah, and the guy is invariably a man with at least 17 stones on him, and he's going to be moving at a pace that is tough to deal with.
Indeed. So it's a tough matchup in that regard for Ireland, but where it's a good matchup for Ireland is simply the turnovers. The turnovers that Ireland
you can isolate
is huge, and England are getting isolated.
Aren't actually resourcing the breakdowns as efficiently as they might have been, but what they are trying to do is dominate the collision such that they don't have to, and they're getting their halfback in there to just whip that ball away from the breakdown. 1 second rucks, even less sometimes if they're actually purring along. And to contain that, it will involve some spoiling. It'll involve some dominant collisions as well, some ball targeting ones. Like, you can't soak meters against this England team. Even 2 or 3 phases in a row of soak tackles, and this England team more often than not will find the try, and they have done against this Ireland team. So it needs to be 1 in 3 tackles needs to be nearly dominant from Ireland, and then combative stuff in the breakdown.
My suspicion is that they're kind of soaking deliberately to try and isolate guys and get the ball.
We've seen that work against England. Actually, Scotland employed that tactic very successfully a few years ago, where they soaked literally every contact, so the ball carrier was behind or through the gain line, but then there were 2 Scotsmen in there to jackal. It worked very well. It's something that this Ireland team looks to have been employing anyway. They are content enough to cede 1 or 2 meters if it gives a chance to make the ruck 5 seconds or 6 seconds or get a turnover, and that will go a long way to stymieing England. When they don't play at their tempo, they are far less dangerous. They are much less dangerous.
What I like about it as well is just that it's not one man. Ty Byrne obviously is the key jackal threat, but it's not, and CJ as well, but it's not just one man. There's so many guys: Big Ian Henderson, Keith Earls,
even Kilcoyne, who's starting this week, has a decent jackal game in him.
There's so many guys coming up with clutch steals that that matchup could work, and it could be a case as it was with France of soaking and sucking up a lot of dangerous contacts, but then managing to make the play to save the day, as it were. But overall, I think on the inside they probably do need to be a little more miserly with yards, and the way to stop the England team really, it's a tough ask, but there's 3 crucial players in the English attack, and that is the ball receiver, the guy next to him in the pod of forwards, the guy on his outside cutting the hard line
man, and then the playmaker at the back.
The guy, the boot,
the simple screen that they have, and they normally have 2 of them. There's normally one on the inside and one on the outside.
But if you can just limit the options of the boot and get in the faces of both the first receiver and his outside man, and then get up in the face of the boot, there's a chance that you can kind of shut down that English defence if you do that, and that involves someone getting in the passing lane outside the boot, coming up, even if he's going to be uninvolved in the play, because they might just truck it up when they see that. But someone needs to get up out in that passing lane, stop them going wide, and then 2 guys or 2 or 3 guys in the forward pod need to shut down the 2 first and second receivers to make sure that they got nothing on the inside. And if you can do that, then you can potentially limit England. And then the other huge defensive area is the line out. What a matchup that is.
It's going to be absolutely great to see that. But Paul O'Connell led resurgent Irish line out against an Itoje led monster of a line out in England. That is box office alone. That is going to be one of the higher caliber matchups of the whole game, just in terms of world class players doing world class things in a very tricky aspect of the modern game. It's going to be a really good show.
And can Ireland do, we said in the build up to this week, that Scotland was the best 2 lineouts up against each other. Ireland dominated that game.
They did.
So can they unpick the England line out? Is that the exit plan? Kicking it, giving England the set piece and then stealing it?
Maybe. It's a picture we haven't seen of this England team. We haven't really seen them
Wales have done it to them once or twice.
Wales have. That's the one I was going to cite. Is just apart from Alan Wynne and his ways, his old kind of sage ways of upsetting their line out, we haven't seen too many teams upset them at source when they love to attack from source. So that is a good scope for Ireland. It'll be built on set piece. If it's to be a victory for Ireland at all, it'll be built on not necessarily dominant, but a winning set piece, both at scrum and line out, because it's their best weapon at the moment. Their pack and their set piece is their best quality.
Exactly. They dominated their way to a 3-point win last week. It is still a concern, but if they can both hold their own at the scrum and maybe get a play or two off there, jackal a line out, poach a couple of line outs, and then win the game on defence, as in stop that English offence, manage to shut them down on the inside, and when they get outside, get a couple of key turnovers, and then own the game that way. End up as a consequence, England give away penalties, the rhythm isn't there for them, it's not happening for them, and then in those key moments on the other end of the field, just the one or two variations required to take chances when they're there, score a couple of tries, dominate the game that way. Chances are, even if they do that, they'll concede one or two to England in the second half. But winning a tight one by dominating the game on the defensive side and not giving England the picture they want on offense,
the ins that they want into attack. You need to be depriving them of that all game, and just be wise in terms of how and where you play the game, and then a little bit sharper and a bit more ambitious on offense has to be a factor too, because I don't. Like a showing like what they did to Scotland won't be enough against England, I don't think.
The kicking game is good, and it is interesting to see if Max Malins can do the job, but England are so aware of it.
Johnny May is so good under those balls, and the counter-attacking has much improved. Sure, Anthony Watson launching off that loose one from France was great to see. Like, we were accusing them of never running anything back from their own half. They've started doing that as the tournament goes on. Loose kicks will be punished, and Murray is going to box kick, probably less loosely than Dupont. He is excellent at box kicking, is Murray, so I expect that is part of the plan, but it can't be the whole plan in terms of how you use
it's
your
just
ball.
One or two, when they played England last, you can have maybe a chaos kicking try, but be sure to try and work a set piece try in, and be sure to win the multi-phase, try and catch them in little areas where they under-resource, like on the short side, like working Tyburn, and the two Tigers into the extremities with Conan perhaps as well, and then maybe poaching a couple of tries that way. That is the Irish picture, but from England's point of view, it's a this matchup has been great to them in recent times.
They definitely have the psychological edge, given that they've won the last however many times they've played. If you want to count all the other kind of club ones as well, there's been a lot of English dominance over the last 2 years, and they are expecting to roll into town and do the same. There'll be no home crowd to do that. As we've alluded to, there'll be no home advantage really. It'll just be whichever team shows up and is best on the day, and England will be very confident in where they are right now in terms of how their games progressed from the beginning of the tournament to now, and in terms of how their game matches up against this Ireland team. There are two kind of real strings of proper confidence that England do have. So even if it gets a bit tough, and if they're facing a kind of a very passionate and fiery Irish performance, which has happened to them before, even if they go a score or two down, that confidence will serve them well, because they know that they can maybe dig it out.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think they want to go a score
or
two
down.
I mean, Ireland are such good front runners.
No,
that's the
that's
game
true.
for me is to start well.
But in terms of if England are behind, the edge will allow them. I think it balances out. Conversely, if Ireland go a score or two down, the fact that they've lost, I just think there's no hope nearly from there. Whereas with England, given that they've had the success in recent things, they can weather an early storm and kind of get back to grips with it and trust their finishers. That was the other thing I was going to say from Ireland's point of view, is just using your bench a bit smarter. Because if we see again Tyburn and Tyg Furlong being fantastic for 60 minutes and then getting hauled out of there and then 14 points being coughed up straight away, that's no good. England conversely have used their bench pretty well. They pretty much won that game. Arguably part of it was the finishers last week against France.
I think England will feel confident if they can get into the last 20 with a
one score in it,
somewhere along there, just because Ireland's game wears heavily on them, and we saw that last week against Scotland. Ireland were quite gassed by the end of it in terms of their forward pack. They got through so much work, and it did nearly cost them. So England should always be alert to the game in that way, and alive to the possibility of Ireland melting down and giving them chances even if they are behind. But I think to begin the game, this team from a mindset point of view loves to start well. They never feel better. And I did enjoy the fact that they conceded an early try to France and then nevertheless came back and set their perfect purring offensive picture. They're one of these teams with their first drive.
They did the same against Wales. They were way down against Wales and then levelled it up with some nice attacking rugby as well.
They've managed to put to bed whatever happens in the first beginning. Instead of having to set up a drive in the first 2 minutes to set their picture, they're now just more comfortable with the fact that whenever the first drive arrives, whenever the first set piece in the opposition half arrives, or counter-attack, or wherever we are, then we're going to set our picture. And they've been really, really great starting games on offense. They've put such variety in. I mean, they have left themselves exposed at the ruck, but it's because they're putting in this level of decoy running and different variations on the same screenplay. Like, I loved the direct pass to Slade from the blindside wing position.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, there was, well, as the game progressed, it became obvious just how difficult this Edwards defence was to unpick, and so to do it at the start of the game was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I definitely think from an England point of view, they know as well as us what we're going to bring on offence. And while it can be good enough if they give us penalty ins and we can set up offensive
discipline
red zone
will still
plays,
be a focus in terms of performance. If they come in a little bit like dialed out, as we saw them in Cardiff perhaps, and being a bit sloppy and giving away those pens, Ireland will capitalise on that for sure.
They will to an extent, but they know what Ireland are going to bring. They know what Ireland are capable of in terms of offence. Probably like a max of 3 tries, you would think. They're even in a dominant game, they're not going to do better than that. So England feel like if they can be the more clinical and more ruthless team on offence, that'll be enough to win the game. And I think that is where, for both teams, the key matchup is. If they can set their offensive rhythm, if they can expose Ireland's soft enough outside defence. Obviously, Henshaw moving to 13 changes that a little, and Henshaw's been great at drifting. Like, he's drifting with more energy than a lot of the other Irish players, because it's Ireland's defence very soak heavy, very drift heavy. Henshaw's been actually putting a hit on the end of that.
He does hit, so he does. Like, even in scramble mode he hits well. He scrags guys and drags them down, sticks tackles, probably more so than Ringrose in that 13
so there is a danger there. There is a danger, and it might not be the day for the Johnny May break on the outside either. It might be the inside balls that can kill Ireland as well. If Ireland are very drift heavy, I think the guys who are cutting those short lines
it's
are
an
going to have to
position for Elliot Daly to be in, isn't it? Out of position at 13 with possibly a few killer passes to be made from there, because there's definitely, like, if he's going to be drawing Henshaw, who's going to be leading the line, then it could be down to his sleight of hand to find the little seams or put Johnny May or someone else away in
he
the
does
space.
like the 13 shirt, apparently. It's his favourite position.
He does, so we'll see how he goes. It's curious because Henshaw doesn't normally play there, Daly doesn't. It's definitely an interesting matchup there in terms of two very different styles of player, and if England are to be successful, it'll involve occupying Henshaw, who's the primary kind of line leader guy, and then getting it through Daly's hands out to the wider channels.
It's occupying the whole Irish defence. It's the key forward pod that they have off 9 and off 10, but the key pod of 3 have to make things happen. And I definitely think there's scope for that, like, second screen position to involve someone like an Itoje or a Billy V or even Wilson, just getting 1 or 2 forwards wider, just so they can be that sort of Tuilagi option who's cutting the short line. Because I think there's real scope whenever Ireland drift for cutting a line inside them. I remember seeing France do it way back in the day, back in the Les Kiss drift defence era. France
2015 era, was it?
Somewhere around then. Declan Kidney's team, they cut I remember seeing France cut like a perfect line in between an Irish drift defence when 2 centres, it wasn't O'Driscoll, he must have been injured, but 2 centres were drifting, and I think Rougerie just cuts a perfect line between them. Those are the lines that England need to be running, and they need to hit the short runner a lot more than they usually do. They love pulling it back, but I just think hitting that short runner 4 or 5 times, keeping the tempo
the Irish defence if you do it quickly,
especially if someone like Tadhg Byrne is waiting in the wide channels to jackal, just cutting through them on the inside and setting a quick ruck and then going again can be enough to discombobulate the Irish defence. And then once they're broken, that's when you see the sort of loose lack of like line speed
and you see the if they manage to do just that, then you see the wisdom of sticking with your 3/4 line of your forward Farrell and now Daly, or it was like guys who can pass it wide quickly, because if you've fractured it there, then it's across the other side is where the try is, and with guys like that in there, they'll be confident that they can
get it from right to left really quickly.
Exactly. With that little simple enough screen shape, but when it's done that quickly and done with purpose in every single run, it's very, very tough to contain, as the French demonstrated with some stellar scrambling plays to manage to hold them to the only true scores. Ireland will need to be on their blow to contain this England offence.
Do you reckon they've had the little some reserve has been wearing the blue scrum cap of Tadhg Byrne this week, and they've been focusing on those clean outs as well?
Maybe they've had 2, because Connors was a late one as well, and there were 2 blue scrum caps doing all kinds of damage on defence for Ireland last week. It'll be a red scrum cap and a blue scrum cap this time with Van der Fleer and Byrne. But they're 2 nuisances. I'm sure they might have done some drill. I'm sure resourcing rooks will have been an emphasis, because the French pinched a few turnovers from them at key times that could have killed the game. And it was a result of how they were doing it. This is where there's trade-offs, as we were saying, like the presentation of the ball, the non-resource of the breakdown was coupled with Young's just being there and the ball being gone.
Yeah, and using their guys who would be rucking as decoys in the line.
Indeed,
just broke up the French defence so well.
So it's the trade-off is your offense is much more effective with those guys as options. Your presentation and protection of the pill is a little sacrificed for that, and Ireland are targeting that. So I'm sure I'd say there'll be a slight change of approach, a slight deviation from last week, where they probably will resource each breakdown with one more player.
Yeah,
literally that. I think it'll be one more player than they were.
He has to hold his feet and ruck well. Like if you're late to that ruck and you end up flying off your feet, it can be like, especially post line break, it can be just such an ugly picture for a ref. Like the ref is just going to see it so easily. So I think they have to mind their discipline on those offensive clean-outs as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, certainly don't be shoulder to heading while you're losing your feet, as we've seen in this tournament before.
But before all of that will come the line-out. I mean,
line-out is
how
a
do you
huge,
pick the
huge
puzzle
factor
of this defensive Irish line-out? What do you do? Like, Scotland tried tamely throwing to 2 at one point and got caught out. You know,
that's no good. That's no good. I think it's probably trust Itoje to call and manage it. It'll involve a bit of deception and a fair few moving parts. I expect they'll get a fair few off. I expect Ireland will probably nick 1 or 2 on them, but it's how you react to that rather than it'd be more curious if Itoje starts giving away penalties, as he has done earlier in the tournament, trying to defend Irish lineouts himself. If they get into that kind of battle and lose it, that's where the risk is. If you start getting annoyed by the fact that they stole one rod and then try and steal theirs, and then it's a penalty, and it's like
there's probably scope from an offensive point of view of doing a bit of defensive lineout work, in that make a call, sure, but be able to adjust it and isolate who the Irish playmaker is, because it can be pretty obvious when you're on the ball. Who's the guy who's going to try and make a play on me? Alright, here he is. It's Ian Henderson. I know this guy is going to try and jump ahead of me if I'm Itoje and I'm receiving the ball. So get a step ahead of him. Just change the call and then get a step ahead of him. Jump early. Quick ball off the top. Just a real focus on that line.
To be honest, I have England have had a very, very high quality line out for longer than this Ireland team. Ireland are just kind of rediscovering their previous form in lineouts. It was a fair few teams ago that it was a Paul O'Connell led thing or a Devon Toner led thing. It's been Henderson Ryan for a while, and it hasn't quite fired. This season it looks very much elite. England have been elite for a long time. Like Itoje's defensive line out, the way he stuffed mauls from teams of all calibers, and then especially teams of tier 2 caliber in the second half, it just looks so cruel because he ends up destroying teams in the second half, and he can do that to Ireland too. Like, he's an 80-minute man. He will still be there in the last quarter to make all the more disruptive plays. I'm just excited for that matchup. It's not I'm hopeful for our boys to win it, but I know that there will be shots fired on either side. I know that Itoje will have some success, and I know Tadhg Byrne will have some success, and I think Peter O'Mahony could have success coming in off the bench too. There's a lot of high caliber line-out operators, and there's Paul O'Connell coaching Ireland. It's just a really good set piece.
It truly is. It truly is. All right. With all that said, how do you see this one going?
It's tough. I see it going badly in my mind's eye, but I'm going to back our charges to deliver an emotional.
What else is new?
I always
have to be the bad guy.
You do, you do. I'm going to back our charges. I'm going to hope that we see a fired up, kind of pumped performance, because I can't really remember seeing that in this England contest for quite a while. I would like to see us be
early game playmaking,
ferocious in the first quarter, absolutely are dominating the collision, even though we don't normally do that against England, but they're so pumped. That's what I want to see from them.
Furlong everywhere.
Guys smashing into ruck. CJ Stander last game in green, firing through contacts,
making
all of that
the big
stuff.
jackal plays.
All of that stuff I want to see, and then a little bit more ambition with ball in hand. I would just love to see a try that involves 2 or 3 passes in a play. That's my selfish Ireland fan, where I'm I'd like to see us
a line break become a score because of support play and offloading.
Yes, indeed, rather than a line break in the middle third that creeps its way up to the 22, where it then becomes 23 phases and then a try. Why not just score the try in the same phase with some lovely support lines? I would love to see all that. I doubt we will. I think it'll be a more scrappy arm wrestle regardless. I'm going to say Ireland win by 4 points.
Yeah, I think if they edge the arm wrestle, That is a possibility. They could, if they win the little battles and again manage to get a score or two on top of that. Like the worst, it would be terrible if they won the forward battle and lost the game, which is also possible.
That's very
if
possible.
England do like a France on them and just catch them with a few chances.
To be honest, like what's more like the fact that they haven't been that clinical all tournament long, and they haven't been taking tries, and even in as dominant a display as you'll ever see from a pack last week, like Scotland pack, with the exception of Hamish Watson, who was hustling his heart out, they were dominated for the full 80 minutes in every exchange pretty much, and yet the backs only turned that into 2 tries and nearly lost the game. So that's a real concern, because England are going to we're not going to dominate. Even if we start with that quarter that I want, they're not going to dominate England for that extended period, and they're going to need to take some scores. They're going to need to be a bit more clinical. Yeah, for sure. And to that end, I probably see England winning, but I definitely see a ding-dong battle. Like, I definitely don't see a blowout for England. I think that Ireland have shown enough up front that they could win that battle, or certainly land some blows if they don't. And there is that matchup on when England have the ball can work out in Ireland's favour if they can get some turnovers and be the more disciplined side. Generally, maybe they could nick the game that way. But I think Sexton Murray swan song.
Yeah, let's do it. I just think that England probably have the mind, us in their mind, and they probably have our number a little bit, and we haven't changed that much.
No, we haven't.
For me to think that that's undone. Also, Eddie Jones was giving us compliments in the media with like a smirk. That would make me think, he's probably got some sort of plan where he's just going to beat us again.
But he always does everything with a smirk. Even if he'd insulted us, it would be with a smirk too.
Yeah, that's true. I think probably England, but I mean, I could say Ireland. Why not? I can say whatever I want.
You can, it doesn't matter. It's going to be consequences. It's a great game anyway, regardless. And it is only the middle game of the weekend, but it is an absolute treat. Ireland v England. Proper Six Nations classic. It's Paddy's weekend in terms of it was Paddy's Day earlier. That's all the colour you need. Come on, Ireland. Let's stick it to them.
Yeah, why not? Go on, Ireland.
Yeah. Alright, with that we will move on to the next. Thank you very much for tuning into the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell as well so you'll be notified when we upload. But mainly drop a comment down below as well. We love hearing your thoughts on the rugby. Cheers.